Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Devil May Play featuring myself, GameLark, and Psychotrip. We decided to create a new series so that we could talk even more about how much we love video games and be really nerdy and stuff.
Damn right, man. That's what we do.
So, our topic for today, topic of the discussion, is going to be downloadable content, aka DLC. And we're going to be talking about what we think the ideal DLC is, good examples, bad examples, things along that line. So, if I'm going to start this off, and you know exactly where I'm going, I've been playing Blood and Wine, which is the newest expansion pack for The Witcher 3. And I played Hearts of Stone as well, which was beyond phenomenal. And Blood and Wine is also turning out to be maybe better, at least as good. It's hard to say, but to basically sum it up, The Witcher 3, in my opinion, has really kind of set a high bar for what the modern RPG can be. And these DLC installments have basically taken that Witcher 3 vision and expanded it. Hearts of
Yes.
Stone really focused on creating compelling side quests. The world that was created for Hearts of Stone was very, very similar to Witcher 3. It was basically like, oh, you get this extra little bit part of the map, and then all this stuff happens there. But the characters that were introduced and the villain that was introduced was phenomenal. Now, with Blood and Wine, they introduced a whole new area, Toussaint, and you get to go there and you get to me, it's basically kind of a reward for your progress through the main game, kind of like, okay, kick your feet back, relax a little bit. This game world is not hellish. It's not like Velen. It's not war-torn. It's a beautiful fairy tale world where you have this really funny, cynical Witcher, and then there's some kind of, main plot going on. But the world itself is, in my opinion, a lot different from the world of the main Witcher series. So I can get into the mechanics, but I just wanted to say, really, those DLC installments are, again, I think, just like The Witcher 3, a high bar for what DLC should be.
Yeah, and see, I haven't played the expansions yet. I mean, you know this, we talk about this all the time. I'm still working my way through the main story of The Witcher 3 because I've just been so busy with everything. But it's an incredible game, and what you said, it harkens back to the age of expansion packs. When DLC, what we think of as DLC, were expansion packs, like your Blood Moon and Tribunal for
I was just going to say, I
the Elder
loved both of
Scrolls.
those. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's, I feel like as gamers, we get very cynical,
Mhm.
especially in the current market, and we assume that things have to be this way. We assume that in a world where video game budgets are getting so high, if we want to keep that $60 price tag, they're going to have to cut stuff. They're going to have to take stuff that would have been cheats and unlockables a couple years ago and turn it into paid content. They're going to have to double dip and triple dip. And sometimes that might be the case, but things like The Witcher proves that at least sometimes that doesn't have to happen. That there is still room for you to make a good, passionate, quality gaming experience, delivering a large amount of content, of quality content, and still making your money back, and then some.
Right.
So it's kind of like we were talking before we started recording this about the post Witcher world. What the idea of The Witcher 3, what it did to the gaming community and what it proved to gamers and game developers. And I think that we need to take those lessons and really take them to heart, because I hear so many people, especially on Reddit, because, people are super cynical on Reddit.
Right.
They say, oh, well, you have to make this stuff DLC, or you have to take all this little stuff out of the game, or that this little stuff doesn't matter. Like when it comes to stuff like cosmetic items and stuff like that, people say, oh, it's just cosmetics. It's fine that you have to pay more for it. It doesn't matter. It's not part of the actual game.
Right.
So I've always rejected that because, I remember a world where, say when you're playing World of Warcraft or something, a game like, yeah, you pay a monthly fee for it, but there's not that much stuff you have to buy alongside that.
Mm.
And a lot of stuff about World of Warcraft would be DLC or microtransactions. Let's just say what a lot of DLC is nowadays, microtransactions in other games. Like, so when people say, oh, it's just like, if you're looking at it from the other end of the spectrum, not necessarily expansions, but on the smaller end of DLC with, microtransactions and stuff. When people say, oh, this stuff has to be paid for, it has to be microtransactions, or it doesn't matter because it's just cosmetic, I challenge those people to imagine a world where in World of Warcraft, anything other than a horse you had to pay for. Think about all those hundreds upon hundreds of mounts and gear and cosmetic items and little toys in that game. Imagine if you had to pay for all of that stuff. Say what you want about World of Warcraft, but the cosmetic stuff, the art, is part of the game experience. There are entire people, especially on, say, role-playing servers, who that is their entire goal for the game, to get all the costumes, to get all the mounts, to look different and brag to their friends about how they, got this rare gear or this rare mount. So DLC has become cynical on both ends of the spectrum. You have what used to be expansion packs being cut down and gutted, and you have stuff that used to be unlockables and cheats and, rare items being sold for 99 cents a pack. So I don't know. I guess my point is it doesn't have to be this way, at least not all the time.
And I'm not going to take necessarily a different approach, but I am going to kind of challenge you on one thing where, okay, so I want to get back to the Witcher 3 DLC and Bethesda games where their DLC, what they do right. But I'm not being cynical, but however, I play like Rocket League a fair amount, right? And they every once in a while, I want to say like every 3 months, something like that, they put out skins, new cars, basically for like $3. Yeah. It's cheap. It's not a lot. Now, to me, that's kind of what you were talking about. However, I have no problem with it because although cars all kind of handle the same, the hitboxes are a little bit different. Like the best cars in the game that pros use are the base cars. Like they put out a Batmobile for, I think, Batman versus Superman. But yeah, and it was fun. It was just kind of silly and goofy. But the main game, like they just put out a new expansion pack called Hoops, which is basically basketball. They didn't charge for it. I heard
about that.
So everyone can enjoy it.
Yeah.
And the DLC is just like I think that there's basically what I'm trying to say is that there's a fine line. There's a balance. Like you see games like Evolve, which we kind of mentioned before we started talking, where everything was up for sale the day it came out, right? And then I'm not 100% about this, but I think Overwatch you can buy skins for that game. However, there's so much shit you can unlock on your own. Like there's a lot that you can unlock on your own. I've only played the game for maybe, 5 or 6 hours, but even still, I was unlocking stuff all the time. But there also, I don't want to get into this drama, but this is something that happened a week or two ago with the Counter-Strike Global Offensive community.
Oh my God.
All the gambling bullshit that went down. So
I watched both Total Biscuit and Jim Sterling go on rants about that.
It was amazing. And the thing about that is, to me, and this might just be me being old, I look at that whole situation and I'm like, what the hell is wrong with people? Like, who is willing to gamble this much money for skins in a video game? But the thing is, because Valve, like, I don't want to make this a Valve or CSGO discussion. I'm just saying it's crazy how much the game culture has changed in the past 10, 20 years. What used to be, like you said, expansion packs where you had to buy it physically. Now you can gamble it online for a chance to get something that's, exclusive or desirable. And you can, rip people off for thousands of dollars by setting up a YouTube channel and promoting your own website.
Your own gambling website.
I'm just going to say this once and then we can move on unless you want to add your 2 cents. YouTube, just as YouTube goes along, I feel like instead of the cream rising to the top, it's just the shit. It's the dregs rising to the top. This is a separate rant, which maybe we can get into later. But I feel like with YouTube and the way that they do their advertising and revenue, They reward people that upload frequently, that don't have a lot of, they obviously, because they upload frequently and because they don't upload like long form videos, it's people that just put out shit content frequently, right?
Yep.
And the animators, I remember when like 2010 or 11, when all these animators started leaving YouTube because they changed the way that they did their revenue, right? People lost like they lost half their income because YouTube's like, actually now we want you to be uploading every single day, 10 minutes long, and we want everybody to be watching your videos. So all these vloggers started taking off. And so now we have this just celebrity culture on YouTube with just the worst dickheads imaginable. And they have these platforms where they just dupe basically kids into spending their hard-earned, well, parents' money or their money on stupid shit like this. It's just a whole separate issue. But what I'm saying is that is a bad example of DLC. And Valve, honestly, it pisses me off that they're just kind of like, well, we have no control over this. No, you can. Overwatch, you can't sell shit. It's locked to your account. That's how you solve the fucking problem. Sorry, drop an F-bomb.
See, Valve is just...
Solve the fucking problem, lock it to the account, game over. You should not have people gambling. They are literally breaking federal law by, like, it's very, very, very fuzzy with this shit.
Yeah,
with
man.
how they're allowing underage people to gamble because they're like, well, it's not gambling.
The internet and video games are still the Wild West. It really is. Okay, that's why it's so easy to exploit us on YouTube, to take down our videos, even though we didn't break any laws or do anything wrong, or if our stuff is protected by copyright. That's just been happening to me lately, and I'm nobody, but it's still the Wild West out there, man. And eventually, there's going to be laws out there, and we just have to make sure people don't go too far. If they go far enough, we have to, make sure that the people who are experiencing this stuff have a say in what happens. But back to the DLC thing.
Bring it back. I had to have that like righteous tangent of just like, how the fuck can you live with yourself and be like this?
Yeah. But I
wait a second. That's why we're not on YouTube. That's why we're doing a podcast, because we're not. No, I'm just kidding. We both are on YouTube, but we're not like that.
But yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you. I'm not trying to say that there's never a time when you should have unlockables be microtransactions or cosmetics be microtransactions. What I'm saying is I reject the idea that has to be how it is.
I agree.
Yeah. And the more we believe that, the more developers and, let's face it, the publishers that own them are going to push that and try to make things even worse.
Sorry, I was just going to say, can we talk quickly about incomplete games? Like, this is a problem that I think happens frequently. Yeah. Where games come out and reviewers even say this game doesn't feel full. This game doesn't feel like everything came with it. I mean, Destiny, I remember that came out. People are like, this is like a half a game. There's so much content that's missing. The Division, which now is riddled with cheaters, because if you're on PC or maybe consoles. Sorry, I don't know. It's either consoles or PCs or maybe both.
It's mostly PC though, I believe.
Where it's just almost unplayable because they put the netcode in the hands of the people that are playing. That's kind of what I've gauged to be?
No. What happened was, at least my understanding of it is that the netcode just. I don't pretend to understand this sort of thing, but from what I've read, the netcode is just completely fucked to hell. Okay. Like, nobody put any real thought or effort into how you make an online infrastructure for a PC game where anybody can modify their game in any way and anybody can hack your game. And it's at the point where it's actually unfixable.
Oh, okay.
Like, I read on Reddit that somebody who it's their job to do this, but they weren't working for this game, actually took a look at the netcode and was saying, if you were going to fix this is fucked from the ground up. If you were going to fix this, you would have to completely remake the game.
So basically, you'd have to make a new game, which is what they're going to do. They're going to make a decision
this will never be fixed, in other words.
Well, they put all that money that they were going to use for the netcode into marketing to make it look cool, and then dropping the graphics from one year to the next.
The Division, I never got what the hell the appeal was to that game. Like, it's...
Well, do you want to run around like an empty city and then randomly come across people? Because then that's the game.
Like, I mean, like, just on a surface level, what is that game about? What is it? What is supposed to draw me into it? I've never even understood. It's some like weird, like third person shooter, Diablo-esque shooter, kind of like Destiny, but where Destiny at least has an interesting environment and art design, and even though the narrative was shit, the backstory is at least interesting.
Yeah, and it had the Bungie thing going for it. It had the sci-fi thing going for it. Like, Destiny was interesting. I am not a huge MMO fan, and it wasn't even an MMO, but I'm saying I don't play games a lot online. I'm, to be honest, more of a single-player person. Not that I can't enjoy multiplayer games, because as I mentioned, Rocket League is one of my favorite games of the past couple of years, but I find it's really hard to find a multiplayer game that you can play by yourself and enjoy a lot. And I'm older, so a lot of my friends just don't play online this much. So the Destiny and like the Division, both of those games, especially Division, I was just like, I don't get it. Like, oh look, you can shoot through a car door and it's cool, and it's like,
I don't understand.
And we need to, maybe we just need it. Maybe this could be our next podcast. We just need to get into Ubisoft the game. We just need to talk about bad trends in gaming. Podcast number 2, bad trends in gaming. Ubisoft can be at the front, maybe even Activision. We'll be fair. We'll let everybody have their spotlight. But that's something that I feel like is a real issue, I should say, with a lot of online games. And I'm hoping that we're going to maybe talk a little bit about upcoming game No Man's Sky. But quickly, I want to wrap up the Division and Destiny. So like I said, when it came out, reviewers were talking about the fact that it didn't feel complete. And I feel like this is definitely a conscious effort. Or not conscious effort, it's a conscious decision on developers and probably publishers more so than developers, that games, it's kind of like, here's a carrot, there's a stick. You see the carrot and you're like, oh, this is kind of cool, but there could be more. I'm going to keep paying for it until I get that carrot.
You know what it is?
And then maybe you eventually get it, but maybe you never do. Instead of just getting what you pay for, you get like illusion. You get half of what you pay for, and you're still expecting more, so you're willing to pay that money to get the other half.
See, this is the reality of the so-called games as service system. I don't know if you've heard that term before, but that's what developers call. It's like the politically correct.
Oh, is this the buzzword?
For exactly what you're talking
about. It's a buzzword.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Game, but it's a buzzword that literally nobody buys into that I've seen before. So I don't know if buzzword is the right word. I think it's more like,
marketers are using it.
Obviously bad thing. Yeah. Games as a service, which is
stupid.
you don't own this game. You don't own the physical game anymore, or even the digital code that you downloaded. No, what you're buying is an ongoing service. It's more like you're renting this game. We have final control over everything you do in this game. That's one of the bad things. So, bad for mods, bad for,
World of Warcraft. That is something.
But see, World of Warcraft is that's different because that's an MMO.
But
MMOs are by definition games as service because you're paying for the subscription. And I actually prefer subscribed games over like giving shit to me piecemeal. I'd rather just pay a monthly fee for everything. But I do see your point.
Well, what I'm saying is that is a game as a service. And I'm not saying good or bad because you can't, obviously, with what is that server that got shut down? Nostarius? Is that the name of it? The server that just got shut down. Basically, if you wanted to play Vanilla WoW, you can't. You have to play the current DLC and
that is a good example of it. And I'm partially biased because I am a WoW fan, so sorry if I sound I'm defending everything. But
we're reaching this point where maybe it's something that we have to talk about as a gaming community. Like, what is expected? Like, is it a product or is it a service? And if it's a product, then shouldn't we be able to, if we start, think about this. You started playing Vanilla WoW, say you started playing Vanilla WoW, what was it, 2004, right? And you really liked that game. You paid for 3 whole years before they put out the first, expansion pack, correct? That was 2007? Somewhere around 3 years. That's a lot of money that you put into World of Warcraft. Say you wanted to keep playing vanilla. Why? I'm just saying, I don't play WoW, but why shouldn't they keep at least like one or two, not one or two, but at least keep servers up that play the vanilla part of the game? And I understand they put a lot of netcode fixing and stuff like that and add features, and they want people to be with the current version of the game. But I'm just saying, imagine if instead of, using a favorite game series of mine, imagine if when you started playing, I'm trying to think. This is tough to do, but I don't want to use Metroid Prime because it's one of my favorite game series, but each game is so different from the last. But I'm trying to think of game series that kind of like Uncharted 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? What if they took all the mechanics from Uncharted 4 and forced it into Uncharted 1 so that whenever you were playing through Uncharted 1, you had to use Uncharted 4's mechanics? And what if you did it like
I'm going to play devil's advocate here. But okay, so and again, I don't think I'm being biased, but I probably am because I am a big MMO fan. I'm a big WoW fan, especially, even though I don't play it that much anymore. It still has a special place in my heart. Games as a service, the idea, it's when it comes to a game like WoW or any MMO, it's the only time where it's even remotely justified, because the idea, what people try to spin games as a service is, this is what they try to spin it as, that it's an ongoing, constantly updating service that we provide to you. We are constantly giving you something new or something that is ongoing, service that is ongoing that would require you to keep paying in some way. So in regards to an MMO, that service you're getting are the actual servers that are staying up at the very least. And then hopefully you're getting, constant patches and stuff like that, and big content patches. And, then there's the expansion packs you have to pay for. But hopefully, ideally, that's at least the size of the original game, so it's justified. So in the case of an MMO, the whole games as a service thing makes at least a little bit more sense, because you actually are getting something for your regular input of cash. Now, the time that games as a service becomes a problem is when they try to use it to justify things like microtransactions, like really frivolous microtransactions.
Sure.
Like that's pretty much what they're saying. They're saying, oh, since you don't want to pay a monthly fee for, I don't know, Street Fighter, well, we're going to sell it to you without the main story and then give that to you later. I think they actually gave it free, but still, it goes to your point of selling an incomplete game and then later adding stuff afterward. Sure. So that's where the games as a service thing becomes a problem. When it's something that's primarily a single player game or something where there's literally no justification for making me pay over and over and over again, you're taking stuff that could have and would have been unlockable and trying to nickel and dime me. And then on top of that, you're saying that I don't own the game and you can do whatever you want with it. Now, and again, in a game like in any MMO, let's take World of Warcraft out of the system. In any subscription-based MMO, it's a little bit more justified because, again, they're relying on those monthly fees you're paying. And I would rather it be a case where I just pay a subscription as opposed to other games that just make it so that they nickel and dime you in insidious ways, make it so that you
like
can't level up as
where
fast.
They cut you out from playing, like you basically like
dividing the player base.
Exactly, dividing the player base.
Exactly. See, that's the dark side, and it's almost exclusively a dark side of games as a service, because that term wasn't even really around when subscription-based MMOs started. Even though you can definitely describe World of Warcraft as a games as a service platform, that term, that mindset that people use it for today didn't really exist back then. So when I talk about games as a service, I'm mostly talking about that nickel and diming. There's really no justification for this. Why in a game that's primarily single player, or a game that does not and should not rely on a constant server connection, are you trying to make me pay for things that should have been in the base game?
Okay. And I think I could see that point to you then. I could see exactly what you're saying, especially, I was thinking, well, WoW at its peak had something like, I don't know, a couple, like over 12, 15 million players. And Overwatch, I know, just released stats, they have like 10 million active players. But they're both very different games, where WoW has to have this expansive world and tons of, like, you have hundreds of people on a server at once versus 20 to 30 people. What is it? Not even 20. It's like, what's the max player count? I think it's like, I can't remember. That tells you how much I played Overwatch. But I see what you're saying. Yeah. I was about to make that point, but then I was like, you know what? Maybe there is something to be said for about like a virtual world type of experience, which is what WoW is. So to wrap things up, since we've been talking about bad examples of how to do it, let's talk about the good examples. And I mentioned The Witcher 3 at the beginning of this podcast, saying how much I enjoyed the DLC and how much I thought with, Heart of Stone, really I kind of said all I needed to, which was the characters and the story for the Heart of Stone was pretty much better than the main story of Witcher 3, which I think a lot of Witcher fans will agree with. Just fantastic writing all throughout, and some of the best missions that Witcher 3 has to offer. However, with Blood and Wine, there was a new mechanic that they added, which I don't want to spoil anything necessarily, but they basically, to me, besides just adding another story and making sure the characters were interesting, which it was, and then having that wonderful new world and tone and environment to explore, which is this huge contrast, this juxtaposition between the cynical Witcher named, Geralt, who's just, chivalry is dead, people are just shitty, versus like Toussaint, where knights do things just purely out of chivalry. The tone alone was worth it. But then they added additional elements to the gameplay, which were one of the biggest things I want to talk about is like they had a couple like fortresses, basically. Kind of, I don't want to compare it to Assassin's Creed, but they had big battles where you had to go and liberate. Basically, you had a base where there's a bunch of enemies to fight. There's a guy when you first get into the base. I'm kind of ruining it a little bit for you, but I'll just let you know. So that way, when you get to your first one, you won't do what I did and just be like, "Huh, what?" There's a dude with a torch that's running to light a signal fire, and if he gets there, like you have to fight double the amount of enemies, basically. So it's just a much harder battle. But what I'm saying is, it added this neat element because you would get to an area and you're like, "Oh, it's a fortress." Like there's 3 in this expansion pack and our DLC. And the first time I was like, what is this? Second time I was like, I'm ready. So you have to fight all these dudes, and then at the end you fight the leader, and then the bandits in the surrounding area stop attacking you, and you kind of feel like you've changed the world around you because when you first get there, there's a wanted poster for these 3 men. So you gradually, if you do all the side stuff and explore, you conquer all 3 of the bases. And I thought that was a neat little thing.
You just described to me. You just described what Ubisoft is trying to do. No, it's funny, but I'm actually very fascinated by this. You described what Ubisoft is trying to do, provide emergent gameplay, extra stuff to do, and try and tie it into the world and the story, but for some reason
they suck at it.
a lot of times fails at doing. And again, it's funny, but I'm actually fascinated at why some games get that wrong and some get it right. Because what you said was very interesting about how you really felt like you affected the world. And I feel like that's something that doesn't really happen when the exact same scenario happens in an Ubisoft game.
Well, part of the reason is this is something I'm saying now, we're going to do bad gaming, not habits. Yeah, bad gaming trends.
There we go.
We're going to do that next because it's just in my mind. With one thing that I'm going to praise The Witcher a lot, but one thing that I love that The Witcher does, and people complain about the question marks on The Witcher. I'm sorry. Okay. It has nothing, not even a close to what Ubisoft does, because the question marks can be any number of things. Okay. There's multiple levels, and you know how much I love Witcher 3, so I'm just going to go on for a second. There's multiple levels to this game. Okay. So basically you have your quest boards where you pick up all your main quests, right? Those are very, very, very clearly marked on the map. You go there, you pick up some of the quests. You know that there's going to be side quests there most likely. Then you have the next layer down, which is question marks, which could be anything from a monster's nest to a short little mission. Most of the time, they're not going to be anything too involved, but occasionally you'll have a big, nice, 30-minute side quest that will result as a kind of result of this question mark thing, right? And then occasionally you could go to structures that you see on the map but don't have any markings on them, and then you find something entirely new there too. That's extremely rare, but it's happened. And what I love is that I don't know when I get into a new area. I do the main quest. a little bit. I do the side quests, go to the mission boards, and then I start just kind of exploring the world and slowly taking care of these quest marks. And sometimes it's quick where you just go and you take out a monster's nest, but there was a really neat side quest that I was playing the other day that was a question mark. And it was this really involved side quest with really good writing and extra characters, and it was fully fledged, fully developed, so that you don't know when you see a question mark what it's going to be. It's that sense of exploration, that sense of discovery that is missing from the latest Assassin's Creed games, because you see every single, what do you call it, the vantage points with the eagles. You see every time you got an eavesdropping thing. You see every single chest that's in the game. Even Far Cry 4 had this problem where I had to turn off the chests because they just were everywhere on the map. There's like 400 chests in Far Cry 4. It was just overwhelming. And all it did was remind you you're playing a video game. Look, here's a chest. Go pick it up so you can get gold to buy something you don't even really need to buy. Whereas Witcher, like the real reward is discovering a quest that you didn't even know was there.
Yes. See, that's the main difference. You answered the question so perfectly about why in The Witcher it feels one way, but why in an Ubisoft game it feels another way. It comes down to whether or not it feels mechanical or organic.
Yes.
And just like you said, in a game like The Witcher, you know, there's there's more mystery, there's more world building involved in it. It doesn't just feel like a chore when you're bombarded with all of these things on the map. You don't always know what's there. Some stuff isn't even marked. It feels organic rather than mechanical.
Even just the normal question marks, unless it's a monster's nest, which is just self-explanatory. You kill the monsters and clear the nest. Even if you do something where like a knight's under attack or something like that, there's always I've noticed at least with this DLC, there's always some note there that explains how did this person get in this situation if there's a dead person, or what happened here, or you see different locations tie into other locations. So it's building this story in the game world where you can see, okay, here's a elven ruin over here. There was a researcher that died outside of the elven ruin trying to research the elven ruin. Here's a letter. Her lover's up north of that area. I'm just giving examples, but you get my point, basically. And in the other game, so what I'm trying to say is I'm basically praising Witcher 3 at this point, but I wanted to praise the DLC for taking some of the core mechanics of The Witcher, really refining it, cutting off the dross. For anyone that's played the game, all the Skellige chests, that was the dross. And then really just giving the most pure, refined experience you could for The Witcher. That's what the DLC has done. And I think another game series, and this will be probably closing stuff, I'm sure you want to jump in on this, the Bethesda games, specifically, like we could talk about, I want to talk about New Vegas just because I know you love that game so much.
Yeah, New Vegas,
and just
the way you feel about The Witcher 3, and I love The Witcher 3 too, but I still haven't finished it yet, so I'll probably feel that way when I do, but everything GameLark's been saying about The Witcher 3 is kind of how I feel about Fallout New Vegas. It's just, it hit all the right points for me. It's an incredible game. There's still so much in that game I haven't seen. Mm-hmm. And yeah, when it comes to Bethesda games, and let's exclude New Vegas just for the sole reason that it was actually developed by Obsidian.
Oh yeah, you're right. But no, let's not.
But even Bethesda games.
I just want to talk about good DLC. We don't have to necessarily talk about Bethesda. Yeah. I just want to, because we could talk about so many different things, but I want to talk about a game that had several different DLC packs, some that I enjoyed more than others, one that I didn't play. I played 3 of them. And what I wanted to kind of give my thoughts on it. And since you've played the game so much, I want to get your thoughts on it. And I will praise Obsidian, I guess. And I'm sorry, you're right. Bethesda didn't do that one. But I'm just saying Bethesda has a good history for the most part, besides a horse armor, of doing good DLC after the game comes out. Really haven't played the Fallout 4 stuff, but at least up to Fallout 4. With the New Vegas, I felt like each of the DLC packs was a completely different experience, right? They changed the style and gameplay, even the combat a little bit for each one. My least favorite of the ones I played was Dead Money, because it felt much more like a horror game, and ammo was limited, and I was just used to being like a badass, wastelander, like a wanderer, and I got my ass handed to me in that DLC. And then the The Mojave Desert one, I forget what it was called. It wasn't.
Mojave Desert one. The whole game takes place in the
Sorry,
Mojave
not the
Desert.
Mojave Desert. The one with all the canyons. With the tribes.
Lonesome Road.
Thank you. No, that was the That was the one I didn't play. The one that.
Oh no, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. The one that takes place in Utah.
Yes. What is it called?
Fuck, what is it called?
You know what I'm thinking about, though.
I know exactly what you're thinking about, but for the sake of the viewers, I
we'll
need
move
to
on. That one was good, but it didn't really feel like it raised the bar. It was where they introduced the what's the guy from the Kaiser's Legion that burned himself?
Joshua Graham.
Yes.
The burn.
Yes,
man,
I believe he was
Honest
in that.
Hearts is what
That's right.
Honest
That's
Hearts.
right. And then
that's when we first see Joshua Graham.
Old World Blues was the last one I played, I think. That was the one that with the crater, right? And the science, all that stuff. That was my favorite out of all of them because one,
it was so great.
The characters were really, really good. You had a great setting. The enemies were really tough in that one. I got, just like Dead Money, not quite as bad, but I got my ass handed to me a couple times there. But I felt like they did something, like Bethesda knows how to create a whole new area. Even with Fallout 3, was it the one they did for that? Forget. But I'm saying,
which one? Fuck, the one with the hillbillies, right?
Right. But my point is, they took the core mechanics, planted you in a different area, added a few things, tweaked it a little bit, made it unique, and said, "Here, have fun." And
you know what was great about the New Vegas ones? What was great was that they had this. Each one of the DLCs was a separate thing with a separate tone and a separate environment, but at the same time, they were all tethered together by this overarching narrative between your character, Joshua Graham, and Ulysses. And the cool thing about that was that if you wanted to do a playthrough, because one thing New Vegas does great is allows you to role play. So if you want to role play a game where you just do one of the DLCs, or you want your story to focus on that DLC, you don't need to pay attention to any of the other stuff about how it all ties in together or whatever. It can still be a separate experience. But if you want to, learn more about the game story and what quote unquote is really happening and the entire narrative that tethers it all together, that's there too. And it's a really cool best of both worlds scenario that I feel like those DLCs provided that a lot don't.
But the one thing I want to mention is that these DLCs, both for The Witcher and for New Vegas, and most Bethesda games, came out well after the main game came out. I don't buy into the day one DLC. I don't feel like that's DLC. Neither. I feel like you are charging me for content that should have been on the disc. There is no circumstance where I say, oh yeah, that makes sense. You were working on the game and then you had to ship it out because, it takes months and months and months to get this distributed. No, it doesn't. Not anymore. I mean, just give it to the player for free day one then. Don't charge people for it. If you say, hey, we have this new character we were working on while we were, pushing a game out and getting it published and printed, then give it to the gamer for free. Like, I don't understand. That concept just doesn't, I don't believe in it, basically, is what I'm saying. That's just paywalling. That's all that is. That's another way.
And see, people say this stuff. People make up excuses for this, and some of the excuses almost make sense. But at the end, I'll get into one later, even though I don't agree with it at the end of the day. But I always look at things from the perspective of a consumer.
Sure.
Nothing you as a company does, none of your bullshit or the shit you have to go through, I shouldn't have to deal with that. All I care about is whether you gave me the product that I should get.
Right.
I don't care how you got to that point. That's not my business. We're not friends. I don't believe in customer loyalty with a big corporation or anything. I am not friends with Bethesda. I'm not friends with BioWare. I don't care about your excuses. Give me the game that I paid for. Now, with that said, one of the excuses I see about day one DLC, like exactly what you said, which is, okay, I get that you had to, like you didn't get this done by the time you had distributed the game, but why not just give it to us for free? The argument against that is when you're designing a game, there's what was the explanation? When you're designing a game, there's certain sections of the staff that just has nothing to do, has nothing to get paid for for a large portion, like the people who make the art, the people who design the story, the people who do anything other than just, programming and tweaking and bug fixing and shit like that. They have nothing to do, no reason to get paid for. They often end up getting laid off. So that sort of thing, the day one DLC or DLC that should have been part of the original game, even if it's not day one DLC, but you're still making us pay for. The excuse is that you need to give, the people who do the art assets, the design, the shit like that, something to do to justify their continued existence.
But again, as a consumer, that's not my problem.
Exactly.
That's a game company. Then give them a different project to work on. The next one.
Exactly. And like that. Because see, it's a sentiment that I understand that exists, but again, that has no bearing on me as a consumer.
It's like tipping your game developer.
What I fucking paid for. Yeah.
It's basically what you're saying. Well, I know you already paid $60, but these guys, they gotta work too. And it's like, well, that's your job. You hired them. They work for you. Find a job for them. I mean, I work in the contracting world. If I don't have a contract to work on, I have to find another contract to work on. That's just the way reality is.
Yeah, let's get to why this is happening. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. The reason why this DLC bullshit, what this all comes down to, and we can sum it up with this, is the over-bloated budgets of video games these days. And because what's happening is that people are saying, and this is what you always hear from the developers and what you always hear for the apologists, which I don't understand why you would apologize and defend a game company. But again, I don't believe in being their friend. Sure. So maybe that's just me. But what you always hear people saying is that games cost so much to make these days. You can't realistically have a $60 game and make your money back without getting more.
The Witcher 3 did it.
Exactly. That's one thing. But then you could say, oh, well, not every game can strike gold like that, blah, 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 blah. But here's the other point, and there's another point after that, but there's another point that a lot of games do make their money back, but the investors are expecting so much more that it's unfeasible. Like, you realize how many movies barely break even?
A lot.
And
I do know
video
that.
Games, yeah, and yet with video games, they expect to make, $5 million in profit for everything that comes out. And so that's a problem right there, not understanding the market, not understanding even we can make a whole episode about that, how publishers and investors don't understand or respect the medium of video games. But the other issue is, okay, so if you're making games that cost this fucking much, why? Like what are we paying for? Are we paying for just like the latest cutting edge graphics? Are we paying for fish AI like that? I think it was Call of Duty a couple years ago. Like in a world where there are so many indie games out there.
Well, I just want to jump in when you're done. Just you finish up.
No. In a game where there's so many indie games out, in a world where there's so many indie games out there that are doing so much with so little, and games that are doing what looks like a lot in its presentation, but really is a lot more simpler, or at least cheaper, and done with a smaller staff than we think. I really don't see a justification to say that we need such an overblown budget that's going to go to bullshit that nobody really cares about, and all it's doing is perpetuating this DLC bullshit and microtransactions that we all hate. Maybe sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes it'll be better just to make cheaper games that don't have these massive budgets.
Well, I could not agree with you more, and I just wanted to add on to that, and we'll wrap it up with this. This is a great way to wrap it up, getting to the root of the problem. I feel like at least as far as Western game development goes, we are in either going through or in the middle of it, the Hollywood phase, where every game is either AAA, $100 million budget plus for like Assassin's Creed, and every game is trying to knock it out of the park and make 10 million copies plus, sell 10 million copies plus, or they're indie games. And what needs to happen is what needs to happen in Hollywood, but I don't know if it will happen in Hollywood, where we need to see the return of $20 to $30 million budget games. Because back at, 10 years ago, even 15, 20 years ago, N64 games did not cost that much to develop. GameCube games didn't cost that much to develop. You didn't have to hire motion capture actors for most of those older games. You didn't have to hire a full orchestra for most of those games. And as these games get more, like I'm saying, there is still a place for those mid-sized budget games. I can point to a perfect example. Yooka-Laylee was funded over I think $5 million within 48 hours because all these gamers that had fond memories of Banjo-Kazooie and simple 3D platformers, early 3D platformers, perhaps I should say. They saw that. They saw the art style and said, I don't need a game with the Unreal 4 engine with the best looking particle physics possible. I want a nostalgic game that looks solid, where the gameplay and the art style are complementary, but not necessarily cutting edge, where they're innovative, but not necessarily, virtual or augmented reality necessarily. Things that are...
And this isn't just... I just want to say this isn't just, for anybody listening to us, this isn't just us talking nostalgically about, games are so much better back then, because I don't always believe that. I tend to be a futurist.
Plenty of great games, but
the thing is, they
want to make their money, like you said, they want to make a lot of money back. So they think, well, if I make these games where we spend $100-200 million on these games. I know, not 200 actually. I think GTA 5 was one of the most expensive games, but even around 100 is still a lot of money. It's $100 million is still a lot of money to pour into a game. And like you said, it's kind of unnecessary. I don't understand why a lot of games have that budget. They don't need it.
It's exactly what you said. It's for frivolous stuff. Like if it was for something like that would actually mechanically affect the gameplay or make the world feel more immersive or, make the gameplay smoother, then that's one thing. But to hire motion caption actors, to have a full orchestra. I mean, that there is a place for that sort of thing.
Uncharted 4 did it well. They did it well.
Yes, but every single game does not have to do that shit.
No, it doesn't.
No,
they don't.
You can have a game that feels big, that feels epic, that feels grand and is enjoyable and that you can play for years without having all of that fluff.
No, I completely agree with you. I think that...
And that's why we have DLC the way we do.
And that's full circle. I think we've covered like a dozen different topics within this umbrella, but I feel like we basically, I feel like we kind of dove into the real deep problem that, like you said, is affecting game development. And you're absolutely right. There is no debating, and we're not trying to say games were better back then, but the people... It's with anything, right? The more people, the more infrastructure, the more bureaucracy, the more money that gets poured into it, the less the chance that it is going to be unique, that it is going to be somebody's unique vision. However, I would like to put a counterpoint up before we exit. I do want to talk real quick, if we're talking about unique vision, because you could tell so many games these days, Ubisoft, are designed by committee, okay? They're just like, take this thing, take this thing.
On Ubisoft
I don't care. But I would love to talk about how fuck Konami, by the way, Konami just shat all over Hideo Kojima. Sony's like, whatever you want. We'll pay for it.
Yep.
Come on board. See, that's why I think, and we can get into this later, I think Sony is a game publisher. Still, they understand the market better than Microsoft or even Nintendo. But that is all I'm going to say. We don't want to get into that. There's a whole nother discussion. But I'm just trying to say there is still hope, but there are a lot of bad business practices going on right now, and that is why we talked about it in this podcast. So I want to say thank you, Psychotrip, for joining me.
Thank you, man. This was really fucking fun.
And this is just the beginning for all you wonderful listeners out there in the internet. We're going to be doing many more like this, so stick around for the next few episodes.